guys, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Shelf. I'm your host, Ronan Tyne HD, and this week what we found off the shelf was... Dementia, released in 1955. It is a John Parker film. It is also a experimental, psychological, black and white horror film. I'm gonna get all those in there, get all the descriptors in there. This film is starring Adrienne, Barrett, and Bruno Sota. I believe I said those names correctly. And I will say, this film... I'm just going to jump right into it. This film is incredibly unique, especially for the era it came out in. I was surprised when I learned that this film was released in 1955. I knew before I watched it that it was in 1955, but it was right before I watched it, right? Right before I was going to turn it on, I was like, holy shit, this film is that old, right? I had thought it would have been maybe from the 70s, 80s, maybe. Just from the descriptions of it alone, I thought it was a little more recent, but no, it is a really old movie. And when I say that, it's there's so many things about it that just do not seem like 50s era. You know, there's not a single line of dialogue, right? The most you're gonna get is a character laughing, right? That is the only sounds you're gonna hear out of the characters' voices or their mouth. That's the only sound you're gonna hear come out of their mouth. It's a very silent movie. Obviously, there's music, but there's also scenes where it lets kind of the atmosphere simmer a little bit. Right, and I think a 50s horror film with this much atmosphere, obviously they had atmosphere, but this kind of atmosphere, right, just kind of shocked me because it just I don't know, just letting it simmer like it did, just letting it sit. I love horror movies that let it just kind of, let it cook a little bit, let the atmosphere cook in the pan a little longer. I always appreciate a horror movie that takes its time. And this movie, even though it's a 57-minute movie, this movie is not long at all, not even an hour. I'd say it still takes its time, right? Well enough for it to develop a very, very rich and deep atmosphere. I know I keep saying that, but it just has such a rich atmosphere that I love so much. But in the fact that this movie, I think, was ahead of its time, especially with it being experimental, it got a theatrical release even, which surprises me, because this film is so avant-garde that I'm surprised a production company even picked this up, especially in the 50s. Nowadays, you can see experimental movies all the time, right? Because, it's a lot easier. There's a lot more indie, film, distribution companies. There's a lot more ways to get experimental films out there. Hell, you could just, release it on YouTube if you wanted, right? There are other ways to get that out there, but back then, none of that existed, right? It was all pretty cookie cutter. And not saying that I hate 50s movies. There are great 50s movies, but you have to admit, a lot of them were kind of by the numbers, right? They followed, a certain guideline. This didn't. This was broke every guideline, right? And I love that. And I think at the time, though, audiences and critics didn't really get it. Of course, it being ahead of its time, being an experimental film, they didn't really understand it. So, of course, the fact that they didn't understand it, production company was like, hey, so we're just going to change a little bit about the movie. We're going to, add some narration to it, and we're going to call it Daughter of Horror. We're going to give it, a super sensational name, and then we're going to cut out some of the best scenes from the movie, because they're too graphic, right? Stuff like that. And I will say that, I'm not going to review Daughter of Horror, but I think one little complaint I have, because I did watch it. After I watched Dementia, I watched Daughter of Horror, and I will say, it's almost the same movie, just of course there's a couple stuff cut, and of course the unnecessary narration by Ed McMahon. It is just unnecessary, right? I think is a good way to say it, because everything in the movie can easily be understood if you're paying attention, right? If you're just watching the movie, you don't need people telling you what's happening. So there's like a scene, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, there's a scene in a graveyard, right? Where it's like a nightmare that she's having, right? The main character, I think it was the Gammon is what she's called. That's her character's name. She doesn't have an actual name. And there's this, like, gravekeeper that wears, like, this strange mask. And he basically walks up to her without a word. Because sometimes the characters speak to each other, there's no audio. Like, you don't hear what they're saying, but he doesn't say a word. He walks up to her, and then he points at a grave that says father on it. And then it zooms, and there's, like, a bed in the graveyard, and it's her father, and it's a flashback to how he was a drunk. He was a deadbeat. He beat her, right? He was an abusive father. Then there was a grave that said mother, and then it cut again to the graveyard. It panned upward, and it was the mother laying on the couch, just chilling. But then the father, they get into an argument, and he figures out, without words, he finds a cigar on an ashtray, and he's like, whose cigar was this? This wasn't my cigar. And they get pissed, and they basically have a wordless argument, right? And he leaves. But then she's just like, oh, I'm just going to admire myself in the mirror. Look how pretty I am. And then he shoots her, right? He kills her, and then the Gammon kills her own father, right? And then the gravekeeper, after, I guess, giving her this, revealing her secrets to the audience. Because not only was the graveyard a literal graveyard for her parents, it was also, I guess, a figurative graveyard where her secrets were buried deep within the crevices of her mind, I guess, is a way you could interpret the graveyard, not just being a literal, but also a figurative graveyard. But there was narration, where Ed McMahon voiced the gravekeeper, and he was doing too much, right? Like, there's no need for narration. You can understand everything going on in the scene without narration. You don't need it. It's simply unnecessary, right? And the reason it's not needed is because the visual storytelling and basically the whole movie is so well done that you don't need narration to explain to you what's going on. You can perfectly understand it without a single word being spoken. And that is an achievement in of itself. I think this film is just incredibly enjoyable. I just very, very, very much, it was very fascinating, I guess maybe is a good way to say it, because, as I said, it just, completely, I guess I was gobsmacked, maybe is a good way to describe it, because, as I said, I'm just astonished that a film like this was able to be released in the 1950s. Like, it totally feels like a movie like this could come out today and it wouldn't even be that far-fetched. Like, this movie could probably do pretty well if it was released nowadays. But I just think that's the thing with this movie, is that it's just so interesting. I also love how, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, where there's this, fat cat, rich asshole, right, that she links up with at some point in the movie, but he doesn't really care about her. He's just kind of being a dick, right, and he's, disrespecting her, and kind of parading her around, basically. Kind of I guess, in some kind of ways, I guess, taunting her in a way, by kind of being I have all this cool shit, and you wouldn't be doing all this cool shit without me. Right? And he just didn't really care about her. I guess she was more arm candy to him than anything else. Either way, in the movie, she kills him at one point. She gets sick of his bullshit, and she kills him. And she stabs him with a switchblade and tosses him out off a fucking balcony, right? I don't know how she was able to do that. He was quite a large man. I don't know, I mean, it's a movie, you gotta suspend your disbelief, but he was quite a large man. I feel like it'd be a little harder to get him over a balcony. Maybe he just fell over, but either way. That's not important, it's just a little nitpick. Either way, he falls down, and then she, goes down to get, because he grabbed her necklace on the way down. As he was falling off the balcony, he grabbed her necklace. So she goes down, and there's, a bunch of people just, frozen in time, just, looking at him, not even moving. They're literally just staring directly down at him, and she, crawls down to get her necklace from his hand, but it's revealed that they're wearing, the same weird mask that the gravekeeper was wearing. All of them that are looking at him, and then, so she, but he has, a death grip, the rich man, he has a death grip on her necklace, so she's trying to pry it from his hands, and he just she just can't, so she gets out her switchblade and she saws his hand off, right? Of course, unfortunately, they don't show it, right? But you get the gist. Like, they show, like, his body, like, moving around as she, like, kind of, as she is sawing his hand off. But one of my favorite parts of the film is the soundtrack, because the soundtrack is so, like nails on a chalkboard, but, like, in a good way. It's very, I guess, grating. It's also, like, very nasty and eerie, kind of haunting, right? As she's, like, sawing into his arm, into his hand. Well, I guess it's kind of a pulse for his arm. Either way, when she's sawing into it, it's like, I think it kind of feels like it's synced up with as she's sawing. It just feels like it's gross, and, like, it's the sloshing of her sawing his hand, like, they're trying to replicate that in musical form. And it's done to perfection. I thought it was, like, very well done, and it was, like, it kind of creeped me out, right? Like, that soundtrack was very well done, because then it would, like, cut to his lifeless body, like, swaying back and forth occasionally, and it was just really well done. For a horror movie of this, I know I keep saying this, but of that time, it was an incredibly well done scene. Probably my favorite scene in the movie. And then she literally just puts his hand in her coat. She's just carrying around this dismembered hand in her coat. That can't be good for the quality of the coat. Either way. So then at the end, the reason I also mention the dismembered hand, is because there's the big reveal at the end. You know, the big reveal. So then it's revealed that it's a dream, right? It's all a dream. So she wakes up, like, at the beginning of the movie, she's in this rundown hotel, and she wakes up from this strange dream, and she's like, oh man, that was so weird, it felt so real. But then she looks at her drawer, and the chain from her necklace is, like, sticking out of the drawer. So then she's like, it can't be. And then she opens the drawer, and the hand is in her drawer holding the necklace, and it grips the necklace. And then she closes it, and she screams in terror. And then the movie is over. Which, it's very great, right? I love that ending. And I think the effect of the dismembered hand in the drawer was actually really good, too. I don't know, just everything about this movie was so well done, and I really, really enjoyed it. Especially as an avid horror fan, I love to see movies like this. I love to see movies that, you know, kind of are outside the norm, right? Or doing something different. Hell, I think even compared to today, this film is quite different from most other, like, horror films, psychological horror films, thrillers, whatever the fuck you want to call it. It is very different from most other experimental type films from today. Either way, with that being said, I just had a hell of a good time with this movie, and I think it's a damn good movie, too. Oh, also, I almost forgot to mention, it's a bit of a feminist film, if you think about it, because the film is about, you know, our main character, the Gammon, and it's kind of about her trying to survive in a male-dominated world, you know, where, well, she has to, well, I guess, the reason she is so violent and she is so aggressive is it's a product of her horrible home life. She was, you know, raised under, you know, I guess sex pests and violence and all that terrible shit, right? I guess degeneracy, right? She was raised under that, and of course it conditioned her to be the way she is. Maybe, like, the whole endless nightmare that's revealed at the end, maybe that's all due to her upbringing. Or hell, maybe even her upbringing wasn't true. Maybe it was also just a part of the nightmare. Who knows? Which I guess it all leaves it up to interpretation, which I do enjoy. You know how much I love interpretation. I talk about it all the time. Either way, I just wanted to mention that, as I thought it was a nice little tidbit that I wanted to mention as a theming of the film. Either way, I would highly recommend this film. I think if you are a horror fan, if you are a film of experimental films that really try to dip their toes into something different, or if you want to dip your toes into something different, I think this is just an excellent film. And I think of the era, I think the horror films of this era, I think, in my opinion, this is a must-watch for horror films of this era. So, absolutely, you should go out. I think you should go out of your way to watch this movie. This movie is amazing. And with that being said, I think I would rate this film an 8 out of 10. And, yeah, I think I have something to say. I think I have some peace. So, guys, I hope you like this video. Share it with friends. Subscribe. Turn those notifications on. Comment down below on how much you liked it. And I've been TrPhD. Off to escape the nightmare. ah, you know what I mean? So I was doing research on this movie, right? And I was looking, and obviously I said this movie was ahead of its time, and unfortunately, something that happens to movies that are ahead of their time is that they're ahead of their time. So people in the current time don't get it. They don't like it, and they're like, I don't understand this. This is stupid. So the critics at the time thought it was like incoherent. It was confusing. It didn't make any sense. It was like muddied. And it's like, I think it was completely understandable. Right? I think it made perfect sense, and I think you just had to pay attention and you'd know what was going on. But as I said, they just didn't get it, and they were being stupid. Stupid critics being stupid as usual. They've always been stupid. That's what everybody says. I don't know. So either way, that's about what I have to say, because critics don't get it, and they never got it. The Thing wasn't liked at the beginning either. Now it's one of the greatest movies of all time. They just don't get it. But then the critics later get it. I don't know. It's a generation thing. What are we gonna do?